Thank you very much and welcome back to Race Industry Week 2023. We have on the screen the one and only Mr. Marshall Pruitt. Good morning, Marshall.
Morning, Francis. Great to see you. Judy, great to see you as well.
You as well.
We're delighted to have you back, Marshall, and you've got a lineup of good speakers this week to be hosting.
Well, we've got Mark Miles, IndyCar CEO, Penske Entertainment CEO. We've got IndyCar President Jay Fry coming up. We have one of the most inspirational IndyCar team owners in Ricardo Juncos as well. And there's Mr. Miles in that incredibly smart blue vest of his.
You know, you look pretty good yourself, Marshall. You clean up pretty well, rarely, but occasionally.
The fact that you'll lie to me this early in the morning, greatly appreciated, Mark Miles.
Good morning, Mark. Thank you for being with us. We'll leave you in the hands of Marshall.
Uh-oh. Well, no, it's a pleasure. I'm sorry that we can't speak longer, but I look forward to chatting with Marshall.
Great. Well, Mark, why don't we take a quick look back at 2023? I think everything else we're going to do for the rest of our 25-ish minutes will be looking forward to the future. A lot of positive things happening for IndyCar this past season. Also, Indy NXT, owned by the series, really big grids there. Not asking for a promo reel. Don't want you to cut a WWE promo for us here, but what are one or two, maybe even three positives coming out of 2023 you and IndyCar are looking to build on as we head towards the future?
Well, we always start with the sport, and I always sort of object when our people call it the product, because to me it's a sport, and tough to grow a sport and your fan base and your fan engagement if it's not compelling competition. So we're very proud of the fact that it was another fantastic year, I think even improving year in terms of the sport, the competition on the track. And I would name that as first. Second, all of our fan metrics, whether it's the television viewership, which was greater than everything than we've had since 2011, or social and digital, and you know this very well, as well as the fans turning up at our tracks. Attendance was way up, merch sales at the tracks was way up. All those metrics really were positive and meaningfully so. I guess third, on the calendar, we announced we'll move Nashville to the finale next year, and we moved from Belle Isle to downtown in Detroit, and Hy-Vee did it again. So I just feel like the calendar's in a good place, and fans appreciated those key moves.
Why don't we kick off there, Mark? Calendar-wise, we know that some of the other series IndyCar is competing with, trying to surpass, done some big things recently, whether it's Miami for F1, Las Vegas taking over the Strip, NASCAR going to downtown Chicago, huge TV ratings, huge positive event for them. Happy that we're going back to Milwaukee. Love that we're going to downtown Nashville. Does IndyCar see some of these big, newer things its rivals are doing and say, wonder if we need to get on the board with some big idea for something new and different we haven't done to engage a whole new audience?
I guess the answer to that question is yes, but I want to go back and reiterate. To me, the move from Belle Isle to downtown Nashville around the Ren Center was that sort of major change and paid off, right? It definitely had a much bigger impact in Detroit than we had before, taking over the city, lightening up the skyline. I thought it was a very important, very impactful improvement. Sort of gracefully, I think, moving to Nashville next year downtown and making it the finale. Maybe that's in between, right? It's a future event when we first do it. Yeah, and you mentioned Milwaukee. Everybody's anticipating Milwaukee. We're stoked about being back there and hopefully, making it bigger and better than, I don't know about ever. I don't go back that far, but in my experience, the best ever. So I feel like those calendar things really mattered. And saying that, we're working on at least one that I think people would see as high impact, very different opportunity for 2025 in the United States that it's too early to talk about, but we're certainly looking for big events and big partners in the process. You're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? I mean, if we have a lot of change, people say, oh, they forgot about date equity, and our fans like to know that if it's in the beginning of March, we must be in St. Pete, and if it's in early April, we must be in Long Beach, etc. On the other hand, we do want to keep it fresh, and we want innovation in the calendar, and we try to find the right balance between the two.
Talk about north of the border, south of the border. Otto Ward might be the happiest human being on earth if we were to announce IndyCar making its long-awaited return to Mexico. I know our beloved fans in Canada would love more than just one visit by IndyCar. You have 17 total races right now. Expanding the calendar north and south, a possibility or a priority for you and Penske Entertainment years to come?
Yes and no. So first of all, we consider ourselves a North American series fundamentally, and that's why whether it's Canada to the north or Mexico to the south, it's going to have to be in North America. It's going to have to be races that we can drive to, get to without the airlift to be championship points races, at least the way we look at it right now. Saying that, I think the international expansion, and in this case, I'm not talking about North America, that opportunity comes as we end the season, in pretty early in September. So we've got 3+ months off, and there, I think, important reasons that we take that approach. But I also think that opens up the possibility of some international event or events where the right conditions come together. First of all, we want to go places where we think we'll have a really dynamite, intense, popular event. And there are places where we think we have that sort of fan base that want us back. So that's sort of the first box to check. Obviously, we'd have to have the right financial conditions, but I think there are opportunities in that regard. And I like it best when we can do it in a time where it's a decent time zone for our North American fans. So we might be in Latin America, we might be in another part of the world, but we'd want to schedule it so that it works both for the crowd in attendance, but also for the time zones that matter most in the United States. So those things all have to come together. And then, maybe there's one or two, or maybe someday 3. Whether or not it works will determine the scale of it. And maybe it wouldn't be, we want to crown our IndyCar champion at the finale in Nashville, but this could be something where it's based on prize money won or some other way to connect 1 or 2 or 3 events together and make more excitement outside the U.S. That helps us in lots of ways, but not do it in a way that kind of convolutes the schedule that we have in North America in the traditional points race.
Let's close on calendar talk, Mark, with we have one confirmed non-points event next year at the Thermal Club, that $1 million challenge. Where's Argentina living on realms of possibility for that post-season slot? You mentioned those number of months of inactivity. New president, new administration has been put in place here finally. Where does Argentina live on possibilities for 2024 postseason?
Well, I don't know if we're in the red zone or just inside the 50-yard line, but I think it's quite feasible, even for the off season, if you will, the post-championship part of the 2024 calendar. The presidential election happened. By all indications, that is not presented any new challenges to us. We have a promoter who is putting together the components to organize a great event. We've got a fantastic facility that's available to us. So I think it could be an example of the kind of thing that we could do. So we just got to get everything, all the I's dotted and T's crossed, and hopefully it can happen, and it could be formalized and made public in probably the early part of the first quarter of next year.
What are you hearing from IndyCar team owners, Mark, about heading to Argentina? I know for some that I've spoken with, somewhat indifferent, right? Not seeing it as a huge financial adder for them. Nothing super negative, but if we go, we go. If we don't, we don't. Are you getting greater enthusiasm from others? If your paddock said, if we were to just stay within North America, that'd be just fine. Curious what you're hearing from the paddock.
Yeah, I don't think that it's a trade-off. Stay within North America versus go to Argentina or Brazil, or you fill in the blank, for non-championship fourth quarter calendar year racing. I'm not sure why we would do that in the US. If we've got a great event that has the vitality that adds to the popularity of the sport in the US, then I don't know why we wouldn't look at it as a potential championship event. I think, as usual, your characterization of the reactions of the paddock are pretty good. There's a couple who say, well, look, the money doesn't really move the needle for us. For most, they think that it's quite helpful. It could be in total a meaningful increase in the leader circle. For example, if we put $200,000 into the leader circle per car, and if we only took 22 cars, the leader circle teams, it's $4.4 million, which is a healthy increase in the total compensation through the leader circle. And I'm not saying that'll be the money, and I'm not saying it'll be limited to 22. But I think in all, it's a meaningful amount of money, especially when you consider we wouldn't do it if the organizer didn't also pay for all the costs to get the cars, the freight, the teams, the people, room and board. Basically, it's like going to this event, and I'm not saying they have zero costs, because there are crashes and things happen. But basically, none of the logistical and travel costs, all of that would be paid. So whatever's added to the leader circle for an event like this, in our mind's eye, would be additive and really quite helpful.
Similar, if not identical, model to what we had with our last international event in Brazil. So interesting. Spent a lot of words recently writing about gaming and IndyCar in hopes that something would work out with your now former vendor. I joke with you that I keep waiting to hear that Mark Miles Gaming Incorporated is going to be developing the next IndyCar platform for folks. Where things at here? Is it realistic to think there'd be anything available by 2024, or is 2025 with whomever more realistic window to set our sights on?
Yeah, I don't think 2024 is realistic at this point. You've already reported on essentially on where things stand. Our contracting party for the development did an enormous amount of work and spent an enormous amount of money. A lot of code has been written, and the bits that we've seen are really impressive, I must say. So, damn it, it's a shame to see all that work not brought to fruition. So I think where things stand is that we understand through their public disclosures that motorsport.com is not in a position to continue to invest to finish the work, but a lot of work has been done. So logically, you think whether it's Miles Gaming or something else, somebody else, it might be a great solution and expedite the completion of the work if somebody comes along who can figure out just the right business model to pick up the work that's been done and go from there. Because we really do think it's pretty impressive stuff. That may not happen. There are complications, but there are phone calls being made, just to touch base with prospective investors or partners or purchasers of the work that's been done so far. If any of that could be pulled off, I think it will expedite the completion of the game, and we'll look forward to that happening one of these days.
We have IndyCar going hybrid in 2024, first time in its history. Not lost on me, Mark, as well. I started riding, I think, on the 10th anniversary of the Delar DW12 chassis. It is now legitimately eligible to enter vintage racing events. Most vintage series have a 10-year moratorium before a chassis will be accepted. We go to Long Beach next year, where we will have IndyCar as the headliner and vintage IndyCars competing. Again, not lost on me. In theory, a team could enter both events with a DW12. A driver described it to me as the Mr. Potato Head of chassis because it's been so heavily modified to maintain its relevance since it debuted in 2012. Curious if you can share Penske Entertainment's view looking at a new F1 chassis that came out in 22, IMSA with new GTP cars, NASCAR with a new Cup car. Is there any urgency within Penske Entertainment to modernize its chassis as well?
I would say that we are entirely focused on the hybrid and getting that on the track and having it be additive for our racing, improving the quality of the racing, increasing the chances of us finding the third OEM that we'd like to find and bring in. And so those are kind of the things right in front of us. And I don't think that that a new chassis is going to get in front of that line at this point. So when it might become relevant, I don't know. But we have great racing. We have fan metrics increasing. We think there's some fan relevance to improving the racing through the hybrid that we're working on, and we want to get all that done well and behind us before we start thinking about what else might be new.
You mentioned third manufacturer. It's not my favorite question to ask, but continue to ask it and hope I get a fun and interesting answer. Any progress here on inquiries from new manufacturers who might want to come play an IndyCar, or those the series has maybe reached out recently to invite them to take a look and consider?
I think that that invitation is an open invitation and on a number of email and phone lists. So really, I think that we're not likely to see the third OEM happen until we get the hybrid on the track and people see what it does for us. And then I think it does some great things. The technology itself is interesting. It's real development. It's not some kind of hybrid motor off the shelf. And by the way, huge kudos to both Ilmor, GM, and Honda for their hands-on work to develop these technologies with us. So that's one. Two, I think it's more horsepower and more exciting racing, even more passing. It offers that opportunity. And three, if you were the next prospective OEM coming in and you've got sort of the current engine, you look at Honda and Chevy as having a whole lot of experience, a big leg up. So a change like this may create kind of a reset opportunity that would encourage a third OEM to join us. We'll see.
Two items to close, Mark. Why don't we talk about the evolution of, I don't know what to call it. You and I have said, do we call it charter? No, well, that's NASCAR's. Do we go franchise? Well, that's what they had back in the kart and champ car days. I don't know if we've come upon, maybe since we last spoke about this, IndyCar has happened upon a name, but the idea of creating equity in an entry for these independent businesses, right? Chip Ganassi tied to IndyCar, but that asset of each entry doesn't have a specific value that could be sold, traded, or otherwise. Know that we reported here on Racer a couple months ago about ongoing efforts to develop this topic. Believe another recent meeting with team owners and such were held. Can you give us an update here, Mark, on how this idea is coming along and if we've come up with a name for it?
Well, maybe this isn't. Maybe we ought to call it a leader circle membership.
Ooh,
you know,
I
because
like that.
I think, as far as I know, the leader circle kind of our thing. Our people know what it is. It currently suggests a certain number of participants in it. So anyway, who knows? Well, maybe that's the name. But I think we all care about the concept, and I wouldn't call it equity, because equity often means different things from a property right perspective. But the idea is to create, whether it's through contracts or some other system of agreements, for the selected teams that obviously are the stellar teams that have had substantial commitments to IndyCar racing and been successful, and to have them have more of a property right, more of an asset value, so that if the day comes when they want to get out, they have something they can sell besides their equipment in their shop. And, listen, Roger Penske is the owner of the IndyCar series, but he's also got a little bit of a track record as an owner of a team in different series. And I think he likes the idea. It's been useful in other examples. We think we can come up with a way that makes it useful for us. There's just lots of questions to ask. We had another sort of round of conversations. I reckon it's almost a month ago. We spoke to the owners of all the teams individually. We floated some options and ideas where you could sort of choose which ones you liked or didn't like. And I think we're still a ways off from having the kind of clearer consensus that we feel like we need to pull the trigger. There's lots of questions, least of which is what you call it. It's how many cars are in it? When were those cars selected? Do they pay? And if so, how much is their investment to get into this group? What are the conditions for sale? And there's probably a dozen others that really have to be worked through. So we continue to float thoughts about those ideas. Some of those thoughts we hear from other team owners, and it's not a concept that I see going away, but I don't think it's one that's going to be locked in, based on this year's results, or we'll see how the relevance of 2024.
Has what you and the Penske Entertainment leadership seen, Mark, with Michael Andretti and Dan Tauris and their desire to bring Andretti Global, to Formula One, and that somewhat ugly public dispute, not necessarily from the Andretti side, but from the individual teams within F1 saying, no, we don't want more, dilute the product. It's been a messy kind of bar the doors type routine so far. Has that shaped your thoughts in your discussions with teams here, whether it's one currently in the series or those you hope might enter, to say, we obviously can't field 40 cars at every round, so there's going to be a limitation to how many we could welcome into a leader circle program, but we don't want to be the series that also turns people away. Has what you've seen with the Andretti Global effort shaped any of your talks here with this charter-ish type thing?
I'll get to the Andretti Global part of your question, but I think the other things you just said in framing the question are really important. There are just a lot of considerations. I already mentioned how many. You just sort of said, well, I would say the bid and the ask is 22 and 27, right? 22 is kind of the traditional leader circle number. 27 is the most we can accommodate on the grid at our races outside of Indianapolis. So, and we've had 27 full-time teams, as you know very well, of late. So we'll see about that. Listen, I have all the respect in the world for Dan Tauris and what he's trying to do, and with Michael, and creating the Andretti Global brand. And by the way, that you probably know, that's not just about motorsports. They are investing in other sports. They're investing in women's sports, and they want to create something, in my mind, akin to Penske Corp, right? Where all their businesses, whether they're the sports businesses or the insurance businesses or you name it, can benefit by the activities, the global reach, and the success of what they choose to do in sports. So the strategy is pretty clear. I do think their situation is an example where trying to create this kind of asset value for the teams can get very complicated. We've benefited, I think, whether it was Holman George, in sort of my 10 or 11 year tenure, or Roger, or Penske Corp and Roger, by single ownership. We have a responsibility. We have to protect the integrity of the sport, but it's not very complicated. If we think something really needs to be done, for sure, we're going to talk with the stakeholders, but then we can decide. And I just don't think we're looking at it. I mentioned, let's not call it equity. Equity to me means, you have an ownership stake in the entity, and you probably have dividends, and you probably have governance, and you probably have a whole lot of other details to the involvement that I don't necessarily believe are helpful to having an agile, upwardly mobile sport. And I think there's a way to avoid all those complications while still creating some asset value for the selected teams. So, yeah, I do think the Andretti global case with F1 is a bit of an example of how, when all the stakeholders are involved in the, let's call it governance, it can get pretty hard to settle.
Ripping down here quickly, Mark, wanted to touch on to close media rights. We have one more year, I believe, in the exclusive agreement between IndyCar and NBC, streaming as well on Peacock. Can you give us an update on how that is going, knowing that seems like I'm reading more, listening to more podcasts. Jay Marine recently from Amazon Prime talking about what they're looking to acquire and valuation and tier one properties. I hope we're going to learn that IndyCar is going to be paid trillions of dollars to be on great networks and streaming platforms. You give us an update how that's going.
Well, a trillion's a lot.
It is.
That'd be pretty sweet. Your starting point in the question is correct. So we first made the NBC deal in 2018 for 19, 20, and 21, and then we extended it for 22, 23, and next year, 2024. So they have our exclusive live rights through 2024 calendar year. In our agreement with them, we did not grant to them any so-called back-end rights. Sometimes, for example, as I'm sure you and some of your listeners know, we might, as the property owner, have a deal with an incumbent partner, and we might get to the point where sometimes you make an offer to them, this is what we want to extend. They say no, you go back out in the marketplace, you get a new level of understanding of what your values are, they go up, you go back to the incumbent and say, now you have a right to match. That sort of thing is just not in our agreement with NBC. And NBC's been a fantastic partner, I really do believe, in every respect, including the basic sort of the business aspects of it. And so they understand that, and they understood what that would mean at the end of the agreement. And what it means is that we are now at the place where we are having, we call a road show. So I've been in LA for a day each of the last 3 weeks, in New York for a day each of 2 weeks, going back to LA before Christmas. And these are conversations that we have. Let me see if I can get rid of this. With broadcasters, and there are several interested parties. These things are not like here's an RFP, fill in the blanks, and we'll see who's highest. It takes a lot of conversation around programming, scheduling, around promotion. Obviously, rights fees at the end of the day are very, very important to us. I think it's going to be a growth opportunity for us, but I don't know about trillions.
I can negotiate on your behalf if you want me to, Mark, but you probably don't. Greatly appreciate you taking some time for us here, Mark. Look forward to the ongoing efforts this week with the ePar Trade, Racer.com, and Speed Sport industry profile of so many interesting folks. Thank you, Mark.
Pleasure. Thanks, everybody. Have great holidays when we get there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Great honor to have you on.
Registering on ePar Trade is easy. To start, click on the Join for Free button on the homepage. First, search your company to see if it's already in our database. If you see your company on the list, click on it to select it. Then, choose Claim Company if you are one of the decision makers, an owner, marketing person, or main company contact. Or choose Join Company if you are an employee, and press Continue. If you couldn't find your company in our database, select Register a New Company. On the following page, fill out your name, email, phone number, job title, and choose a secure password. If you chose Register a New Company, you'll need to choose your business type. Select Supplier if you're looking to display products or services and connect with buyers. Choose Racing Business if you're looking to source new parts and connect with suppliers. Choose Race Team if you own or are a member of a professional race team. Then, enter your company name. Please provide a website, Facebook page, or LinkedIn if you have one, and choose to either claim or join the company. You can view and agree to our terms of use here. If you'd like to receive our weekly newsletter, choose Accept. Finally, click Register Now and your registration will be submitted for approval. An email will be sent to your inbox. Please confirm your email address and you will be approved shortly. Welcome to eParTrade.